when the Galactic Council first picked up the strange signals coming from the edge of the Orion region. They didn't think much of it. Space was full of odd noises, static from dying stars, whispers from old satellites, natural radio bursts. But these signals were different. They were fast, messy, unpredictable, and full of sudden changes. They sounded like something alive. Something emotional. The Council sent a small team to investigate, expecting to find a species just beginning to understand technology. Most new civilizations reached space with steady, slow development. But when the team's ship entered the solar system, their first shock came quickly. Dozens of human satellites circled Earth in every direction, some new and shining, others old and rusting, yet still refusing to fall. It was the first sign that humans didn't always follow clean order. They patched things, fixed them, reused them, and kept going even when logic said they should stop. The landing team expected a calm welcome, whatever humans were. They couldn't be too advanced. But the moment they landed on a quiet plain outside a major human city, things became confusing. Humans gathered around almost instantly. They came running, shouting, laughing, recording videos. Some scared, some excited, some crying happy tears for no reason anyone could understand. The Council team had met hundreds of species, but never one that reacted in so many different ways to the same event. One of the diplomats, a tall creature with shimmering silver skin, tried to introduce the Council's mission. But before he could finish his careful speech, a human stepped forward, smiling nervously, and offered him a bottle of cold water. No one knew why. It was neither hot nor a ritual of any kind. Humans simply had a habit of helping strangers, even when there was no clear reason. Later that night, the team learned something else. Humans didn't sleep much during exciting moments. They asked questions nonstop. Some questions were scientific. Some were strange. Some were jokes. And humans laughed even when they were tired or scared, which confused the visitors deeply. Most species laughed only as a social signal or a mating habit. Humans laughed because it made them feel better. It was their way of surviving stress. The Council tried to study humans quietly, hoping to understand their behavior. But humans didn't let them. They invited the visitors everywhere, to homes, parks, museums, even to family dinners. And oddly, they treated the alien guests the same way they treated each other, with curiosity, warmth, and moments of sudden chaos. One night, at a human family gathering, the visitors finally understood something important. When the house lost power for a moment, the humans didn't panic. They lit candles, laughed, checked on each other, and turned the moment into a small celebration. Most species feared disorder. Humans turned it into a memory. This ability to take stress and turn it into strength was new to the Council. Weeks passed, and communication between Earth and the Council grew easier. Humans were emotional, yes, but also fast learners. They understood the Council's technology quicker than expected. They asked bold questions. They made predictions with surprising accuracy. They showed a strange talent for problem solving, often jumping to answers without following any logical steps. One high-ranking Council member described humans like this: "They are unpredictable, but never without reason." Still, the Council had no intention of involving humans in any serious interstellar matters. Earth was young, inexperienced, and untested. The Council simply wanted peaceful contact, but peace rarely lasted long in the galaxy. On a quiet morning, news spread across the Council stations. A small but dangerous conflict had begun near the border of Council territory. A hostile species attacked a neutral colony, hoping to capture its resources. It wasn't a large war, just another small clash that happened from time to time. Council fleets were sent to protect civilians and handle the situation, but the problem was timing. A group of human advisors had been invited to a nearby outpost to observe basic Council operations. They were not trained for war in space. They were only supposed to learn about galactic diplomacy. When the distress signals from the colony echoed through the station, everyone froze except the humans. Without waiting for instructions, they ran toward the docking area. They asked for ships. They asked for weapons. They asked how far the colony was and how many people were trapped. They cared less about orders and more about the people in danger. The council officers tried to stop them. Humans were not soldiers of the galaxy. They had no right to interfere. It was too risky, too sudden, too emotional. But humans responded in a way the officers would never forget. One of the humans said, "If someone needs help and we can help, then we help." That's it. It was a simple sentence, but it carried a power the council didn't understand yet. In the end, the humans didn't wait for approval. They boarded a small emergency craft and launched themselves toward the colony. The council officers, fearing diplomatic disaster, scrambled to follow them. The human rescue attempt was messy, fast, and full of mistakes, but somehow everything worked. They landed in areas the council marked as unsafe. They improvised shields from damaged equipment. They communicated with frightened civilians using calm voices and simple gestures. They carried people on their backs, pushed through smoke-filled corridors, and used broken tools as weapons when they had to. Other species watched live feeds with wide eyes. Humans were fragile compared to many galactic species. No claws, no natural armor, no psychic abilities. Yet they ran into danger as if fear came second to responsibility. When the council forces finally arrived, the humans had already led hundreds to safety. The visitors expected chaos, but instead found order created by humans in the middle of destruction. A council commander approached them later and asked, "Why did you do all this? You were not trained. You did not know the rules." A human answered, "You don't need rules to protect lives." That answer spread across the council like wildfire. It impressed some and unsettled others. Most species relied on systems, procedures, and centuries of discipline. Humans relied on instinct, improvisation, and a strange kind of emotional courage. The rescue mission was a success, but it created a major argument within the council. Some members said humans were heroes. Others said humans were too unpredictable, too emotional, and too willing to take risks. If allowed into galactic conflicts, they might start helping in ways that disrupted formal strategy. The debate grew louder. Should a species that acted purely on instinct be allowed to participate in galactic military operations? Humans didn't understand the argument at first. They didn't see what they had done wrong. To them, saving people was natural. But to the council, it was a sign that humans could become unpredictable elements in future wars. Later, during a private meeting, one council scientist said quietly, "Humans don't fight because they want to win. They fight because they cannot accept losing someone." That single observation would shape everything that came later. After the rescue incident, humans were asked to step back from further military observation. The council claimed it was temporary, but rumors began spreading that humans might be restricted from participating in future galactic conflicts. Not because they were dangerous in the traditional way, but because they were too willing to throw themselves into danger for others. And the galaxy had never seen a species like that. Still, even as tension rose, humans continued to act like themselves. They visited colonies. They offered help fixing damaged buildings. They played with local children. They laughed with strangers. They shared food with anyone who seemed lonely. The council kept watching them, unsure if they were a blessing or a problem. But deep inside, many council members felt a growing fear. If humans could do so much in a small incident, what would happen if they ever joined a real war? No one had the answer, but soon the galaxy would learn it. After the incident at the neutral colony, Word about the humans spread faster than anyone expected. Every council station, every trading hub, every research lab, everyone was talking about the strange species from Earth who jumped into danger without orders, without training, and without hesitation. Some species found it inspiring. Some found it reckless. But all of them agreed on one thing. Humans were unlike anyone the galaxy had seen. For a few days, the galaxy felt strangely calm. The council tried to downplay the rescue story so it wouldn't affect political relationships. Humans were kindly asked to stay away from military zones. Diplomats politely explained that their involvement had caused unnecessary complications. But many officers secretly whispered that the humans had saved lives more effectively than anyone else. The humans didn't think about the politics. They continued exploring stations, asking questions, helping crews with repairs, offering to lift heavy equipment sometimes without being asked. They were curious about everything: the shape of alien tools, the smell of alien food, the songs aliens sang during work. Their curiosity made them easy to talk to, even for species who were usually shy. But beneath the friendly exchanges, something else was happening. A growing number of planets were being attacked by a pirate faction known for fast strikes and unpredictable raids. These pirates didn't follow any honor codes or negotiation protocols. They simply attacked wherever they saw weakness. The council had been dealing with them for years, but the attacks had suddenly increased. No one knew why. On one quiet evening at a council outpost, a distress signal arrived from a small mining settlement on a moon far from the main trade routes. The signal was shaky, filled with static, but the message was clear. Pirates had landed and were forcing people out of their homes. The settlement had no weapons, no trained fighters, and no defensive walls. They were calling for help with fear in their voices. Council emergency ships were too far away. By the time they arrived, the pirates might already have taken everyone. Inside the outpost, human advisors heard the signal. They froze for only a second before doing what humans always did, reacting with emotion first, logic second. They turned to the nearest officer and asked how far the settlement was. The officer tried to explain that they didn't have the authority to interfere. Humans weren't allowed on rescue missions, but humans didn't wait for permission. They ran toward the hangar, grabbing whatever gear they could find. One picked up a toolkit, another grabbed medical supplies, another simply stuffed energy bars into a bag. They weren't trained soldiers, but they were ready to help. The council officers panicked when they saw the humans boarding a small shuttle. They tried to stop them, shouting warnings about regulations, dangers, and political consequences. It was pointless. The humans had already powered up the engines. A communications officer yelled, "You don't even have weapons." A human called back, "We don't need weapons to rescue people." The shuttle lifted off the platform and shot into space, leaving behind a trail of confused officers who had no idea how to explain this to their superiors. As the shuttle raced through the stars, the humans argued not about the danger, but about how to keep everyone safe once they arrived. Humans liked planning, even if the plan changed every 5 minutes. They talked about using the shuttle lights to distract the pirates, using sound recordings to create confusion, finding back routes through the mining tunnels. They didn't know if any of these ideas would work, but they were willing to try anything. When they reached the moon, the humans saw fire rising from the settlement and smoke filling the sky. Pirates had already taken several mining buildings. The sight made the humans silent. They weren't soldiers, but in that moment, every one of them felt a responsibility so strong that fear had no place left inside them. They landed behind a large storage structure, hoping the pirates wouldn't notice. When the hatch opened, they moved fast. Humans always moved fast when someone was in danger. They ran toward the nearest building, where frightened families were hiding. The humans knocked gently, whispering for them to stay quiet. The families didn't know who these strange visitors were, but the calm voices and quick actions made them trust instantly. Humans guided them to the shuttle in small groups, making sure no one was left behind. At one point, a blast shook the ground. A pirate patrol had spotted movement. The humans didn't run away. They split into two groups. One group helped civilians escape, while the other group created distractions, throwing metal pieces, banging pipes, even shouting from different directions so the pirates would chase shadows instead of people. It was messy. It wasn't neat or elegant, but it worked. The humans kept the pirates confused long enough for over 200 people to escape. One human used a broken mining vehicle as a shield, pushing it with all their strength while others hid behind it. Another human climbed up a damaged building to set off an alarm system that scared the pirates into thinking reinforcements had arrived. These weren't planned tactics. They were instinctive actions. When the council ships finally reached the settlement, expecting to find a disastrous scene, they instead saw the humans guiding the last group of civilians into the shuttle. The pirates were already retreating, confused by what had happened. They weren't used to opponents who didn't fight normally. Humans fought with creativity instead of weapons. They fought with heart instead of strategy. The council forces surrounded the area, and the commanders stepped out to greet the humans. The officers looked stunned. One commander asked, with genuine confusion, "How did you manage all this? You had no weapons, no reinforcements, and no training." A human simply shrugged and said, "We saw people who needed help." Those 6 words spread through the galaxy again. And once again, the council began to worry. The rescue brought praise from many planets. Messages of gratitude flooded in. Some said the humans were heroes. Others said the humans should be given proper roles in defense teams. But inside the council chambers, leaders had a different reaction. They sat in long meetings discussing how dangerous this could become. Humans didn't follow rules in emergencies. They didn't wait for orders. They didn't think about politics. They acted emotionally. They acted fast. And they cared too much. That made them unpredictable in war. And unpredictability could destroy carefully planned operations. One council leader said, "They are dangerously compassionate." Another replied, "Yes, and that is the most difficult kind of danger." Rumors began again. Humans might be banned from any future involvement in conflicts. Not because they were violent, but because they were too willing to go into danger for others, even when it wasn't their responsibility. Meanwhile, the humans at the outpost heard none of these discussions. They sat with the rescued families, sharing food, telling stories, helping repair damaged equipment. They didn't see themselves as heroes. They thought anyone else would have done the same. But the galaxy knew the truth. Most species would have waited for orders. Most would have followed protocol. Most would have protected themselves first. Humans were different. They didn't join the rescue because they were brave. They joined because they cared. And that single quality made them powerful and frightening for the council to deal with. Late that night, as the humans slept exhausted on the floor of the outpost, a group of council leaders gathered in a closed room. They whispered about restrictions, new rules, and special orders. They argued quietly about what to do with humanity. One finally said, "If we don't limit them now, one day they will change every war in the galaxy." Another replied, "Yes, and maybe they will win every war. But at what cost?" A long silence followed. No one knew it then, but this was the beginning of the official ban that would shape the future. The humans, still unaware, simply rested after saving lives. It was a normal day for them. Helping someone felt natural. They had no idea the galaxy was afraid of how naturally they did it. And soon, the galaxy would take a step that humans wouldn't forget. The council could no longer ignore humanity. After 2 unexpected rescue missions, both successful and both filled with chaos, the entire galaxy was watching Earth with new eyes. Some species admired humans, others feared them, and many simply could not understand how a species, so physically weak, could act with such strong will. The Council wanted answers. They needed to know what made humans behave the way they did. So an idea was proposed. It started as a small suggestion in a meeting, but soon it spread through every department until it became official. The humans would be invited to participate in a tournament of commanders, but it wasn't a real war. It was a massive simulation, created to test leadership, strategy, and decision-making across different species. It had existed for centuries, and only the most respected military minds were allowed to participate. The goal was to learn, not to win. Every move, every order, every mistake would be studied. Humans were not meant to be in this tournament. The Council only added them so they could observe human behavior in a controlled space. They believed the simulation would reveal flaws, impulsiveness, lack of discipline, emotional decision-making. They believed the humans would fail. The humans accepted the invitation without thinking twice. They didn't understand the politics behind it. They only heard that it was a challenge, and humans loved challenges. They saw it as a chance to learn more about the galaxy and to make friends with participants from other worlds. Before the tournament started, the humans gathered in a council training hall. It was a bright, open room filled with control panels and large screens. The humans looked around like tourists, pointing at devices, asking questions out loud, laughing at mistakes they made while trying to figure things out. One of the assistants whispered to a colleague, "They act like children." The colleague replied, "Yes, but children who jump into fires to save people." When the tournament began, dozens of species entered virtual battlefields. Each commander had a team, a base, resources, and objectives. The tournament wasn't just about fighting. It tested how well a leader protected civilians, managed crisis, and adapted to unexpected dangers. In the first round, the humans studied the map. They didn't rush into action. They didn't try to control everything. They simply walked around the room, sharing ideas in normal conversation. They didn't try to dominate. They didn't talk about winning. They talked about understanding the mindset of the other species. One human said, "Let's think like them." Another said, "No, let's think like people who care about them." The council judges, watching the screens, raised their eyebrows. Most species focused on military logic. Humans focused on emotions. It made no sense. But when the round began, the humans adapted faster than anyone expected. The other teams followed planned routes and strategies they had practiced for years. The humans changed their plan every time something changed on the map. They never stuck to one idea. They improvised constantly. When the simulated enemy attacked their base, the humans didn't respond with force. They evacuated the simulated civilians first, then set up traps to slow the enemy down. They lost buildings, but they saved everyone. The judges were shocked. The humans had ignored the main objective, but still managed to turn the situation around. At the end of the round, the simulation announced the results. The humans had the highest survival rate of civilians out of all participants. No one clapped. No one cheered. Most species were too confused. In the second round, the challenge changed. It was a negotiation scenario where commanders had to prevent conflict between two hostile groups. Many teams tried to intimidate or threaten the groups into backing down. Some offered trade deals or promises of protection. The humans did something no one expected. They didn't start with power or fear. They started with empathy. They asked questions. They tried to understand why the two sides were angry. They appealed to their hopes instead of their weaknesses. The judges watched quietly. One of them leaned closer to the screen and whispered, "They are not playing the game. They are trying to help. And strangely, it worked. The two groups in the simulation calmed it down. The humans found a compromise that benefited both communities. It was simple, almost too simple. But the simulation accepted it. Another win. By the third round, every team in the tournament had eyes on the humans. Some were annoyed. Some were curious. Some were frustrated that a young species with little experience was beating them in tasks. They had been training for their entire lives. This round was harder. It involved a large-scale simulated war with 3 enemy factions and a limited number of resources. Most teams prepared long strategies. They mapped out every step, every unit, every movement. The humans didn't. They said, "We'll figure it out as we go." The judges nearly gasped. But the humans meant it. They believed that planning was good, but adapting was better. And when the simulation began, their instincts shone again. They protected their simulated civilians instead of focusing on territory. They avoided unnecessary fights. They created fast alliances with one of the enemy factions by communicating with them instead of attacking. No one had ever done that before. Halfway through the round, the simulation's enemy AI became confused. It wasn't programmed to understand diplomacy from players in this scenario. It was designed to fight. But the humans didn't fight. They redirected the conflict instead of feeding it. At the end of the round, the humans didn't just survive, they ended the war faster than any species in tournament history. The council members exchanged worried looks. One whispered, "This is not a good sign." Another whispered, "Or it is the best sign." The fourth round was the most difficult. It wasn't about strategy or survival. It was about sacrifice. The commanders had to choose between saving their main base or saving a group of civilians trapped deep inside enemy territory. For most species, the choice was obvious. The base was more important in the long term. It held resources, supplies, and command systems. Losing it meant losing the entire war later. The humans didn't even discuss it. They went for the civilians. Their base was destroyed. They lost nearly every resource. Their entire military strength vanished. But the simulation announced one thing. The civilians survived. The judges stared at the results. Some were angry. Some were impressed. But all understood one truth. Humans would always choose people over victory. In the final round, the humans were given a fresh map, a new enemy, and new challenges. But halfway through the round, something unexpected happened. The simulation introduced a crisis that wasn't part of the original design, a malfunction that created a scenario meant to be unwinnable. Most teams panicked. They were trained for specific patterns, not broken rules. The humans, however, adapted instantly. They didn't complain. They didn't freeze. They simply said, "All right, let's fix this too," and changed their entire plan on the spot. They saved most civilians again. They survived longer than any other team. They ended the round with an outcome no one predicted. When the tournament ended, the results were displayed on a massive screen in the council chamber. The humans weren't first in every category, but they were the only species that passed every moral test. They were the only team that protected civilians in all rounds. They were the only team that refused to sacrifice people for victory. The council chamber grew quiet. Leaders from dozens of planets sat in rows, watching the humans on the screen. One leader spoke softly. "They are not warriors." Another answered, "They are protectors." A third added, "That makes them the most dangerous fighters in the galaxy." The council understood something that day. Humans were not motivated by power, not by control, not by fear. They were motivated by a deep emotional drive that no other species had. They didn't fight for glory. They didn't fight for land. They fought for life. Any life. It was inspiring and terrifying. The council concluded. In private chambers, that humans should never be allowed in real galactic wars. Not because they were weak, but because they were too strong in the ways that mattered most. Their instincts, their compassion, their adaptability, their chaotic bravery, these qualities could change entire wars. They could rewrite strategies the galaxy had followed for centuries. The ban was not announced yet, but the decision was growing like a shadow over humanity's future. Meanwhile, the humans were celebrating with snacks they had found in a small market near the training hall. They laughed about their mistakes, shared stories, and made plans to visit other planets. They had no idea the galaxy was afraid of them. They simply felt happy that they had learned something new. But the galaxy had learned something far bigger, and soon. The consequences of that discovery would fall heavily on humanity. When the sun rose the next morning, the house felt strangely calm, as if the tension from the previous night had settled but not fully disappeared. The main character woke up earlier than usual, maybe because their mind had been running nonstop. Even though they had barely slept, they felt a quiet determination inside, something that hadn't been there for a long time. It was like a small whisper telling them that things might finally change. Slowly but surely, they stepped into the kitchen and found the older woman already awake, preparing breakfast the same way she did every day. But today she moved slower, her shoulders slightly bent, as if she had spent the night thinking too. When she turned and saw them, her eyes softened a little. It wasn't a smile, but it wasn't cold either. It was something in between, something that showed she remembered everything that happened, but didn't want to make the morning heavier. "Sit," she said softly, and the main character obeyed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet sound of tea boiling on the stove filled the air. The main character looked around the kitchen, noticing small things they had never paid attention to. Before the chipped corner of the table, the uneven paint on the wall, the old calendar still showing last month. These tiny details suddenly felt important, as if they were clues to understanding the woman better. When she finally placed tea and bread on the table, she sat down across from them. She didn't look directly at them when she spoke. "Last night, you surprised me," she said slowly. The main character didn't know what to reply. They kept their hands folded on the table, waiting. "You said things I didn't expect. And maybe I wasn't fair either." She paused, not used to admitting such things. "I am strict. I know that. But I am strict because life wasn't soft with me. I learned everything the hard way, and sometimes I forget that others don't have to learn the same way." Her voice wasn't emotional, but it held a weight that made her words feel real. The main character nodded gently. "I didn't mean to disrespect you," they said. "I just wanted you to understand me. Even a little." The older woman sighed, a long, tired breath. "And I did," she said quietly. "More than you think." That moment didn't solve every problem between them, but it opened a small door one that had been locked for years. They shared breakfast in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was the kind of silence that comes after people finally understand each other a little better. Later that day, the main character stepped outside to get some fresh air. The morning breeze felt cool against their skin, carrying the smell of damp soil and leaves. The street was slowly waking up children heading to school, shopkeepers lifting shutters, birds hopping between wires. Everything felt normal, yet something in the main character's chest felt new. They had no grand plan for the day, but they felt the urge to do something meaningful, even if it was small. So they walked toward the park nearby, a place they used to visit a lot when they needed space to think. It was quiet there, except for the sound of people jogging and distant laughter from a group of kids practicing a dance routine. The main character sat on a bench and watched them, feeling a strange warmth inside. Those kids didn't care who was watching. They weren't worried about being judged. They just moved freely, laughing at their own mistakes, cheering each other on. The main character smiled. Maybe that was what they needed, to stop worrying so much about being perfect or pleasing everyone. Maybe all they needed was the courage to simply be themselves. As they were thinking, someone sat beside them. It was an older man, someone they had seen around the neighborhood but never spoken to. He had a kind face, the type that made people feel safe without saying a word. "You look deep in thought," he said casually. The main character chuckled. "Just sorting things out in my mind." The man nodded. Life has a way of doing that. It makes you hold a lot inside until you finally need to let it out. His words felt strangely fitting. They talked a little, nothing too personal, nothing too heavy. Just simple conversation, the kind that makes a person feel lighter. Before leaving, the man said something that stayed in the main character's mind for the rest of the day. Whatever you're facing, remember this. You don't have to carry everything alone. Even the strongest people need someone to listen. The main character watched him walk away, thinking about the people in their life, the older woman, their friends, even strangers like the man who could still teach them something. Maybe support didn't always come from where you expected it, but it existed, scattered in small moments. That afternoon, they returned home feeling calmer. The older woman was in the living room, sorting through some old boxes. When she saw them, she didn't say anything, but her expression was softer than usual. "What are you looking for?" the main character asked. She pulled out an old notebook and placed it on the table. "Memories," she said simply. The main character sat beside her. The pages were filled with her handwriting, old recipes, little stories, small notes she had written over the years. Each page showed a different part of her life, a side she never shared. There were even drawings made by someone she had once cared for deeply. "It's strange," she said quietly. "When you get older, you start realizing how much you kept inside. Things you should have shared. Things you should have said." The main character looked at her gently. "You can still share them," they said softly. For the first time in a long time, she smiled. A real smile. She began telling stories about her childhood, about the struggles she faced, about moments of happiness she rarely talked about. The main character listened carefully, feeling honored to be trusted with pieces of her past. Hours passed without them noticing. It felt like they were rebuilding something they both thought was lost. As evening settled in, the older woman closed the notebook and said, "I think it's your turn now." "My turn?" "You told me things last night, but I want to know more. Not because I'm judging you, but because I finally want to understand." The main character felt a wave of emotion move through them. No one had asked that before. No one had shown interest with such sincerity. So they began talking slowly at first, then more openly. They shared their fears, their hopes, their mistakes, their dreams. They spoke honestly, without holding back, and she listened quietly, absorbing every word. It didn't feel like a lecture. It didn't feel like a conflict. It felt like a connection finally forming. By the time they finished, the room felt lighter, almost peaceful. The older woman placed her hand gently on theirs. "You have been carrying too much," she said, "but you don't have to anymore. Not here." Hearing those words felt like a warm blanket wrapping around their heart. It made them feel safe, something they hadn't felt in years. That night, when the main character lay in bed, they realized something important. They were no longer walking through life alone. They had someone who, despite her tough exterior, cared deeply. And they cared too. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for the first time, they felt ready. Because now, both of them were finally learning how to understand each other. One simple conversation at a time. The next morning began in a very unusual way. The house felt warmer, quieter, almost softer than it usually did. It was as if the long conversation from the previous day had opened a window inside the home. letting in a kind of gentle air that neither of them had experienced for a long time. The main character woke up with a clearer mind. For the first time in weeks, they did not feel heavy or stressed. Their thoughts were not running wild. Instead, there was a strange calmness, a sense that life was slowly trying to settle itself in the right place. They stretched, sat up, and took a moment to feel grateful for how much had changed in just one day. When they entered the kitchen, the older woman was already there, preparing breakfast, just like always. But something was different in her expression. She was not wearing her strict look. Instead, she looked almost thoughtful. When she noticed them, she nodded gently. "I made extra tea today," she said, without looking up. The main character smiled. It may have been a small gesture, but it meant more to them than she realized. They sat down quietly, letting the smell of warm tea fill the room. For a few minutes, they simply enjoyed the silence between them. A silence that felt comfortable now, instead of cold after breakfast. The older woman surprised them. "Can you help me with something today?" she asked in a calm voice. They nodded quickly. "Of course." She handed them a small list. "I need a few things from the market. But take your time. No rush." The main character froze for a second. No rush? That was not something she ever said. She was always about schedules, structure, strict timing. Hearing her say it so casually felt unreal, but also comforting. As they left the house, they felt light, almost excited. The market was always a lively place, filled with different sounds vendors calling out prices, people bargaining, children laughing, the smell of fresh fruits and spices floating through the air. It was a place full of life, and being there helped them feel grounded, that they took their time picking the things from the list flower. Vegetables, tea leaves, and a few small items the older woman needed for cooking. While walking between the stalls, they heard someone laughing loudly. Turning around, they saw a group of young people gathered around a street musician. It was a man playing a small wooden flute. His music was simple but beautiful, the kind that touches your heart without trying too hard. The main character stood for a moment, listening. The musician's eyes were closed as he played, as if he was living inside his own world. People around him began to drop coins into his small basket. The main character had no coins with them, but they stayed anyway, appreciating the music. For a moment, they imagined what it must be like to play something that makes others stop and feel something. It sparked a memory, a faint one, of how they once loved music too. They had forgotten that part of themselves. But now, listening to the flute, something inside them woke up again. After leaving the market, they took a longer route home, carrying the bags and thinking deeply. They wondered how many parts of themselves had been hidden away over the years. How many dreams had been pushed aside. But now, life was giving them a chance to rediscover those parts again. When they reached home, the older woman looked up from the table. "You took a while," she said, but her voice had no irritation, no sharpness. "There was a musician at the market," the main character explained. "I stayed to listen." To their surprise, the older woman didn't scold them. Instead, she nodded slowly. "Music can do that," she said quietly. "It makes people remember things they thought they forgot." The main character felt a warm feeling in their heart. She understood more than they expected. For the next few hours, they worked together in the kitchen, something they rarely ever did. The older woman chopped vegetables while they sorted the groceries. There was no tension, no misunderstanding. They spoke in small snippets, sometimes staying silent, sometimes sharing small stories that filled the room with warmth. At one point, the older woman paused and said, "I've been thinking." The main character looked up. "You have talents," she continued slowly, "but I don't think you've had the chance to explore them properly." The main character blinked in surprise. "Talents?" "Yes," she said firmly. "You have a way with people. And you see things others don't. That itself is rare. No one had ever said something like that to them before, not in such a sincere tone. They felt a lump form in their throat, but tried to hide it. Later in the afternoon, they both sat in the living room, each doing their own small task. The older woman was mending a pillow cover, and the main character was sorting out some papers. Everything was peaceful. Then suddenly, the older woman stood up slowly and approached a small cabinet in the corner of the room. The cabinet was old, covered in dust, and locked with a tiny key. She opened it carefully and took out a box wrapped in cloth. "I want to show you something," she said. The main character sat up straight, curious. She removed the cloth and opened the box. Inside was a small photo frame, some letters, and a notebook filled with musical notes. "This belonged to someone I cared about a long time ago," she said, her voice softer than ever. "He loved music very much, played many instruments. He wrote his own melodies too." The main character looked at the notebook with deep interest. "He taught me one important thing," she continued. "That life is too short to hide what you love. If you care about something, you should hold it close, because someday you might regret losing it." She closed the box and looked directly at the main character. "I don't want you to live with that kind of regret." For a moment, everything stood still. The main character felt something shift inside them, something strong, something emotional. The older woman had never shared such a personal part of her life before. It felt like she was offering them a bridge, a connection deeper than anything they had experienced with her before. That evening, the main character stepped outside for a walk to clear their mind. The sky was turning orange, and the wind felt cool against their face. They walked along the quiet street, thinking about everything the older woman had told them. Her stories, her memories, her soft tone, it all meant something. They realized she had been carrying her own pain for years. Pain that she never showed. Pain that shaped her into the strict person she became. But now she was slowly letting her guard down, and that meant she trusted them. When they returned home, the older woman was sitting on the sofa, waiting. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes," the main character replied. "What is it that you truly want to do in life? Not what people expect, not what you think you must do, but what you want." The question hit them deeply. They had never truly asked themselves that. They had always lived according to responsibility, expectations, and pressure. They lowered their eyes. "I'm not sure," they said honestly. "I think I forgot how to dream." "That's okay," she replied gently. "You can start again." The main character felt tears rise, but blinked them away. No one had ever encouraged them like this before. They weren't used to being seen, understood, or asked about their dreams. They whispered, "I want to find myself. I want to learn who I am." The older woman nodded. "And you will. But you have to take the first step." Those simple words felt powerful. That night, the main character went to their room and sat on the bed, thinking deeply. For the first time, they didn't feel lost. They didn't feel alone. They felt supported, understood, and valued. They realized they were finally ready to move forward, not fast, not perfectly, but steadily, because someone believed in them. And sometimes, that's all a person needs to begin healing. The next day began with a soft quietness, the kind that makes a person stop and think before they even open their eyes. The main character felt this quietness wrap around them, and for a moment they stayed still, letting their minds settle. Something inside them felt different, now lighter, calmer, more hopeful. Maybe it was because of everything the older woman had shared the day before. Or maybe it was because, for the first time in a long time, someone had believed in them. As they got out of bed, the room felt brighter than usual. Sunshine slipped through the curtains, painting warm shapes on the floor. It was a small thing, but even that light seemed to carry a message. Today could be the start of something new. In the kitchen, the older woman was already preparing breakfast. She moved slowly but steadily, carefully pouring tea into 2 cups. There was no tension in her body, no frustration in her movements. When she looked up and saw the main character, she gave a gentle nod. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," they replied. Taking a seat, the atmosphere between them felt soft again, like a new friendship was quietly forming. They talked about simple things, how well they slept, how the weather looked outside, what small tasks needed to be done that day. Nothing serious, nothing heavy. Just calm, human conversation. After breakfast, the older woman took a deep breath and looked at them thoughtfully. "I've been thinking again," she said. The main character smiled a little. "About what?" "About your future," she answered. "And something else I didn't tell you." The main character straightened. They had learned that when she said she had been thinking, it usually meant something important was about to be shared. She wiped her hands on a towel and sat down across from them. For a moment, she didn't speak. She seemed to be choosing her words carefully. "You know how I showed you that box yesterday?" she asked. They nodded. "There is something else connected to it," she continued. "Something I wasn't sure I should tell you." The main character waited quietly. That person, the one who loved music, he didn't just play instruments. He used to teach others too. He believed that every person has a sound inside them, something that belongs only to them. And he said that if a person can find that sound, it becomes their strength. She paused, watching their reaction. He wanted to open a small school one day. Not a big place, just a warm room where people could come, learn, and find themselves through music. The main character felt a soft ache inside. They remembered the musician from the market, the sound of the flute, the feeling of something waking inside them. They remembered how much they once loved music too, even if they had forgotten that part of themselves for years. "Why are you telling me this now?" they asked softly. "Because," she said, "I think you are at the beginning of discovering your own sound, and I want you to have the chance that he wished for others." The words hit them deeply. It felt like someone had opened a window inside their heart. The older woman stood up and walked to the same cabin again. This time, she did not take out the box. Instead, she took out a small folded cloth. When she returned, she placed it gently on the table. "Open it," she said. The main character unfolded the cloth slowly, unsure of what they would find. Inside it was something small, delicate, and shining. A wooden pendant, shaped like a tiny musical note. They touched it gently. It felt warm, worn at the edges, as if someone had held it many times. "He wore that every day?" the older woman said. It reminded him of who he was. "I want you to have it." The main character froze. "But I can't take this. It's too precious." "I know," the older woman said softly. "That is why I want you to take it. You need something that reminds you of yourself too. Something that tells you that you matter, that you have a purpose." Tears gathered in the main character's eyes before they could stop them. The older woman reached out and placed a hand on their shoulder, not stiffly, not reluctantly, but with real warmth. "You are not alone," she said. "Not anymore." The main character couldn't speak for several seconds. They held the pendant in their hands, feeling its weight, feeling the trust that came with it. After a few moments, they whispered, "Thank you." The older woman only nodded. Her eyes soft. Later in the afternoon, they both stepped outside together. The sky was a clear blue, and a gentle breeze moved through the trees. They walked slowly down the street, side by side, without needing to talk much. It felt peaceful. Two people who had misunderstood each other for so long now, walking together like old friends. At the end of the street, they reached a small park. The older woman sat on a bench, and the main character sat beside her. You know, she said, I wasn't always this strict. The main character smiled. I guessed that. She took a deep breath. Life can change people. Sometimes in ways we don't expect. Sometimes in ways we don't want. But if we are lucky, someone comes into our life and reminds us of who we used to be. The main character listened carefully. Her words felt like a confession, something she had carried inside for too long. I think, she continued, you reminded me of the part of myself I lost. The part that still believes in gentle things. The part that still feels. The main character looked down at the pendant in their hands. And you reminded me that I can still grow, they said quietly. That I can still become something better. A soft smile appeared on her face. That's what people do for each other, even when they don't realize it. They sat there for a while, watching children play, listening to the laughter around them. Life felt simple in that moment, but also full of meaning, full of hope. When they walked back home, the main character felt something building inside them. A desire, a spark, a quiet dream. They wanted to learn music again. They wanted to explore who they were meant to be. They wanted to live in a way that felt true to their heart. That evening, the older woman made tea again, and they sat together at the table. The main character held the wooden pendant and said softly, I think I want to start learning again. She looked up. Learning what? Everything, they said. Learning how to follow my dreams. Learning who I am. Learning how to make something of my life. I don't know where to start, but I want to try. The older woman felt a warmth spread inside her chest. Then that is enough, she said. Trying is the first step. Everything else will come with time. The main character nodded slowly. I want to make you proud. You already have, she whispered. Those words were simple, but they carried a weight that touched the deepest part of their heart. It felt like something inside them finally healed. Before going to bed, the main character placed the wooden pendant on their table, in a spot where they could see it every day. They touched it gently, making a promise to themselves. No more hiding. No more fear. No more forgetting who I am. As they lay down, a soft smile appeared on their face. For the first time in a very long time, they felt excited about tomorrow. They felt ready to begin again. Not as someone confused or lost, but as someone finally stepping into their own life. And sometimes, that small step is where everything truly begins.